Making your first sale, sending out your first invoices, all of those are momentous occasions. But you have to be honest when you say nothing beats when you first get that money in hand for making your first sale. Whether that's because you billed for it or it was a cash sale, doesn't really matter. That's really what we're in business for, even though a lot of people don't like to talk about it. We're in business to make money. What we need to understand is that in QuickBooks, it's not just let me have the money, now let me spend it. We need to actually account for that. There comes that word again, the accounting. Fortunately, in QuickBooks, it's a fairly easy process, but it is a process. In this chapter, we'll go through how to receive money, how to make bank deposits, and how to make sure everything is marked correctly so that your customers get credited for their transactions, you know where the money is, and all of the books are clean. It's turning out to be a pretty good day. I just received the mail and there's a couple of checks in there that I need to go ahead and put into QuickBooks so I can mark those counts as paid off and also so I can go to the bank and make a deposit. In order to do that, I need to work with my customers because, of course, it's my customers who make purchases. We know that we can use the home screen where they actually have a Receive Payments link, but we've been doing quite a bit of that, and so just for a little change of pace, I'll remind you that you also can use your menus. I'll go to the Customers menu, and about, a third of the way down or so, there is a Receive Payments option. When you click on this option, it opens the Receive Payments window. The first thing we need to do in this window is tell which customer we have received a payment from. So I'll use the drop-down list, and the first one that I have is from Andy Blaine of Blaine Design. And we can see that what happens as soon as I select the client is that on the right-hand side, it tells us what his total balance is, $315. That's helpful because this way I can know if the check I've received is a partial payment, a full payment, or maybe even too much of a payment. Now I can start processing the payment itself. Under the amount, I'll put in $315. And then I'll go ahead and put the date that this was received. And I can choose the method of payment, which is a check. When you accept credit card payments, which is a different lesson, we actually can go ahead and do that and have those processed online. But he just wrote me a check, which is great. Because he wrote me a check and I selected that as the payment method, I now have the option to enter a check number. This is not required, but it really is a good reference because if Andy ever calls me and says, I don't remember making that payment or I thought it was more, I actually have more information in my records. I can remind him what check number it was, and if we ever need to talk to the bank, I do have that record as well. So we'll go ahead and enter that check number in. And then I'll do something else that is also optional, but I highly recommend, and that is to put a memo for the payment. This isn't required, but it really makes it a lot easier when you're looking at reports and things to know exactly what was paid and what it did. In this example, I'm going to say what invoice was paid and that it was paid in full. That way I don't have to open up the payment windows or open up the original invoices to try to find out these things. It's really a simple process, and it really makes your reporting self-explanatory. I'm going to put Invoice number 1, paid in full. If you're wondering how I know this was for invoice 1, we just need to look at the bottom of the screen. Once you select a customer, this whole area will fill up with all of the details of any open or not completely paid invoices. In this case, Andy only has one. Invoice number 1 from July 9th. Over on the right, $315. That's still the amount that's due, and we are putting in a $350 payment. At the very bottom, it gives us a total. So if he had more than one invoice, it would total them up here for me. And then I get to see the totals for this transaction. The amount due is $315. The amount that's applied is $315. There are 0 discounts and credits applied. Therefore, he's going to have everything paid off. Since I have a second check that I also want to process, I'm going to click Save and New instead of Save and Close. Now I'm back to another blank payment screen. This time I'll choose from the drop-down, and I'm going to choose Brookfield Mechanical. By choosing Brookfield Mechanical, we actually get to see their invoice. I did not have to choose just the one job. If you recall, for Brookfield, we have an ongoing training job as well as a QuickBooks 2009 rollout. I could select either one. I happen to know that this payment is for the QuickBooks rollout. But by clicking on just Brookfield Mechanical, I do have the option of seeing all of their invoices for all jobs together. I then am going to go ahead and finish this just like I did for Andy's. But there's a little bit of a difference here. They owe $21,145, and they haven't paid the whole thing. They've sent me a check for $10,000. The date that we received that, since I received both of them in the mail, was also August 7th, and it was by a check, and now I'll put in their check number. Under the memo, instead of putting paid in full, I will put that it was either a partial payment or I can put in a balance, whichever one will help me most. Now we need to pay just a little bit of attention to the bottom half of the screen. We have the invoice, just like we did for Andy, with the original amount and the amount due, and we can see that the amount that we put in here is actually the amount entered up above. That's easy. I just wanted to explain that if we had more than one invoice, we could actually split payments between multiple invoices, or we could pay a later invoice rather than the earlier one. The amount of the payment is actually editable. For example, I could come over to the $10,000 and I could turn it into $5,000. If I did that, of course, it would tell us that there is money that's unapplied, and that's not a good thing. But I just wanted to show you that this is an editable amount. So let me go ahead and change that back to $10,000. When we get down to the bottom of the screen, we will see why we still have some extra work to do. We've applied the $10,000 check. We know that there was $21,145 due. So all of that math is taking place. But what I need to do next is to actually work with a credit. On the left side of the screen, we can see that QuickBooks is keeping track of things for us, and it says, okay, hang on, you've applied this to invoice number 2, but that means that there's an $11,145 underpayment. They haven't paid the whole thing. What do I want to do as the business owner? You can either leave it as an underpayment, which is what I will do, or you can write off the extra amount. For example, if somebody wrote you a check and it was 2 or 3 cents short, you probably don't want to keep that on their account and you can just charge it off. That's what this option will provide you, and it appears anytime you have an underpayment for what is due. The next thing that I can do is move over to discounts and credits. Let me give that a quick click. Here I can see that we have an invoice for Brookfield Mechanical, the $21,145 that we were looking for. Then there are 2 tabs that I can work with. If I would have set up terms for this client, maybe they got a 1% discount if it was paid within 10 days of the invoice date, then this would be populated. Since it's not, it just says net 30, then this is blank. If that was applicable, then you would put in the amount of the discount, and QuickBooks would have calculated that amount for you. You can change it if you want to. And then you also need to put in the discount account. You have to put that money somewhere. The second part of this is where you can work with credits. And what I'm seeing right now is that there are no credits sitting here for Brookfield Mechanical. If they would have credits available, they would be listed. I could check off the ones that I want to use, and I don't have to use them in full. I can actually choose to use a specific amount. So let me go ahead and say that I'm going to cancel out of this because they don't have any available. And everything is done as far as this particular payment is concerned, and since I don't have any more payments to process, I'll click Save and Close. When a payment is received, all of the funds that are being worked with have to go somewhere. Remember that double entry bookkeeping thing we talked about a long time ago? Well, originally what I had was I had both of these invoices that was sitting in the accounts receivable account. Now that I've received the money, it's kind of sitting in limbo. It's sitting in an account now called undeposited funds, meaning I'm holding on to it. I have checks or cash in my hand, but I haven't actually moved them into a bank account yet. That's okay. You just need to know that that's what happens to it until you physically make the deposits.